The Grand Hall of Station Viridia buzzed with excitement and curiosity. Hundreds of alien delegates from across the galaxy had gathered for one purpose. They wanted to meet the newest species to join the galactic community. The humans had finally figured out how to travel faster than light, and everyone wanted a piece of what Earth had to offer. Ambassador Patricia Morrison walked into the massive chamber with confident steps. She wore the dark blue uniform of the United Earth government, and her face showed no fear. Behind her walked Daniel Harris, a lawyer who carried a small data tablet. The device held something that would shock every alien in the room. The aliens didn't hide their feelings. Most of them looked at the humans like sharks looking at small fish. They saw opportunity. They saw profits. They saw a young species that didn't know the rules of galactic trade yet. Krelax was the first to speak. He represented the Zetherian Empire, one of the oldest and richest civilizations in the galaxy. His body had 6 arms, and his skin was covered in green scales. He waved 3 of his arms in a gesture that seemed friendly but wasn't. "Welcome to the galactic community," Krelax said through his translator device. "We are happy to trade with your people. We will give you technology. You will give us your raw materials and workers. The rates are standard. This is how we do business." Patricia smiled, but her eyes stayed cold. "Thank you for the welcome. We have prepared our own trade agreement for you to review." The room fell silent for a moment. Then the laughter started. It began with one alien and spread like wildfire. Within seconds, dozens of different species were making sounds of amusement. Some laughed like humans. Others made clicking noises or deep rumbling sounds. But they were all laughing at the same thing. The new species thought they could make demands. A tall alien with blue skin and 4 eyes stepped forward. Her name was Velterra, and she represented the Solarian Consortium. Her people controlled much of the galaxy's trade networks. She looked at Patricia with barely hidden contempt. "How cute," Velterra said. "The children want to write their own rules. That's not how this works. You are new here. You don't have ships or trade routes or galactic currency. You have nothing but raw materials and desperation. We will tell you the terms. You will accept them." Daniel pressed a button on his tablet. Instantly, every alien in the room received a copy of the human trade contract. The laughter continued for about 15 more seconds. Then it stopped. The aliens started reading. Their faces changed. Some looked confused. Others looked angry. A few looked impressed. The human contract was 300 pages long. It wasn't just a simple trade agreement. It was a complete legal system. The document covered everything: worker rights and safety, environmental protection, fair profit sharing, intellectual property protection, detailed dispute resolution processes, penalty clauses for violations. And most shocking of all, the contract included military enforcement provisions. Krelax's eye stalks quivered as he read. His green skin turned a darker shade. "This is insane. You demand equal profits? You demand worker protection? You demand environmental studies before any resource extraction? These terms are for powerful civilizations, not for newcomers who just learned to leave their own planet." Patricia's voice stayed calm and clear. "These are our minimum requirements. We will not trade under any other terms. We believe in fairness. We believe in respect. If you want to trade with Earth, you will follow these rules." "And if we refuse?" Velterra asked. She clearly expected the humans to back down immediately. "Then we don't trade with you," Patricia said simply. "We will find partners who believe in fair dealing. Or we will trade with nobody at all. We can wait. We are very good at waiting." The chamber erupted in noise. Aliens argued with each other in dozens of languages. Their translator devices struggled to keep up. Some were offended by human arrogance. Others saw this as an opportunity to negotiate. A few stayed quiet and just watched. An alien made of crystalline structures observed silently from the corner. His name was Kyle Zeth, and he represented the Threxian people. The Threxians were known as tough but honest traders. Kyle Zeth didn't laugh. He didn't argue. He just read the contract carefully and thought about what it meant. 3 hours passed. The debates grew louder and then quieter. Finally, Krelax approached Patricia again. He clearly believed he was being generous. "We will accept 20% of your terms," the Zetherian said. "We will modify another 30%. The rest we will remove. This is far more than any new species has ever received on their first day. You should be grateful." Patricia shook her head slowly. "We accept all terms exactly as written, or we sign nothing. There is no middle ground." Krellax's skin turned almost black with anger. "You have no leverage here. You have no power. You have nothing. You need us far more than we need you. Your planet has resources we want, but there are 1,000 other planets with the same resources. You are not special." Daniel stepped forward. "If we are not special, then why are you here? Why did 47 different civilizations send representatives to meet us? You are here because you want something from us. That means we have value, and we will not sell our value cheaply." The aliens continued arguing. Some got angry and left. Others stayed and tried different negotiation tactics. They offered bribes. They made threats. They tried to appeal to human greed or fear. Nothing worked. Patricia and Daniel remained firm. By the end of the day, 3 small civilizations agreed to sign modified versions of the human contract. They were not major powers. They didn't control important trade routes or have massive fleets. But they agreed to most of the human terms because they saw benefit in fair trading relationships. The major powers like the Zetherians and Silurians walked away. They refused to sign. They believed that economic pressure would eventually force the humans to accept normal galactic trade terms. They thought hunger and need would make Earth desperate. Veltara stopped at the door and looked back at Patricia. 6 months had passed since the meeting on Station Viridia. Life on the mining colony of New Terra moved at a steady pace. The planet was rich in rare minerals that were crucial for making advanced computers. Humanity had started a partnership with the Drexel Corporation, a company owned by the Zetherians who had reluctantly agreed to work with human terms after seeing they had no other choice. Linda Hayes was the human overseer assigned to monitor the mining operations. She was a short woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Every morning she walked through the mining facilities checking equipment, reviewing reports, and making sure everything followed the contract rules. On this particular morning, something felt wrong. Linda couldn't explain it at first. The mining equipment was running normally. The workers seemed fine. But her instincts told her to dig deeper. She pulled up the shipping records on her datapad. The numbers didn't match. According to the reports, Drexel was mining exactly the agreed amount of minerals each week. But when Linda checked the actual shipment weights, she found something disturbing. The ships leaving New Terra were carrying twice as much material as the reports claimed. Linda's face went red with anger. She immediately checked the environmental sensors around the mining site. What she found made her even angrier. Chemical waste was being dumped directly into the underground water system. The contract specifically forbade this. The agreement required all waste to be processed and neutralized before disposal. She didn't waste time. Linda contacted Earth's Trade Compliance Office directly. The communication reached Director Frank Martinez within an hour. Frank was a serious man in his 50s who took his job very seriously. He gathered his team immediately. Catherine Bell was the enforcement specialist. She was young but tough, with military training that showed in how she carried herself. Paul Sanders was the expert on alien law. He was older, quieter, and knew every detail of every contract humanity had signed. Frank spread the evidence across the table. Linda found clear violations. They're stealing our resources and poisoning our planet. What does the contract say? Paul pulled up the relevant sections on his screen. Sections 12, 17, and 43 are all violated. The environmental damage alone triggers the severe breach clause. We have every right to take action. Catherine nodded. What kind of action? Frank's voice was cold. We send them formal notice. They have 72 hours to stop all operations, clean up the environmental damage, and pay the penalties listed in the contract. If they don't comply, we move to Enforcement Phase 2. The notice reached Drexel headquarters on the Zetherian homeworld within hours. Executive Threxon read it while eating his morning meal. He had 3 heads, and each one smiled differently. The message amused him greatly. Ignore it, Threxon told his staff. The humans are trying to scare us. What can they actually do? File a complaint with the Galactic Trade Council? That process takes decades. We will be old and retired before anything happens. The Galactic Trade Council was famous for being slow. Most species just accepted small violations because fighting them took too much time and money. It was easier to absorb the losses and move on. Humanity had very different ideas about justice. Exactly 72 hours after the notice was sent, the UES Defender appeared in space above New Terra. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with perfect precision. Captain Gregory Foster sat in the command chair looking at the planet below. His orders were clear, and he would follow them exactly. Drexel Mining Operation, this is Captain Foster of the United Earth Ship Defender. You are in violation of your contract with Earth. You failed to respond to our compliance notice. You have exactly 1 hour to evacuate all your people and equipment from New Terra. This is your only warning. On the planet's surface, Threxon nearly choked on his drink. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This is insane. You can't threaten military action over a trade dispute. This is illegal. Catherine Bell's voice came through the communication channel. She spoke slowly so the translation would be perfect. Section 97 of your contract explicitly allows military enforcement for severe breaches. You were given multiple opportunities to comply. You chose to ignore them. The time for talking is over. Threxon tried to contact the Zetherian government. When he finally reached them, they were equally shocked. Military force over a contract violation was unheard of in modern galactic society. Wars were fought over territory or resources, not over paperwork and trade agreements. The Zetherian government sent an angry message to Earth demanding the ship withdraw. The human response was simple. They sent a copy of the signed contract with Section 97 highlighted. The Zetherians had signed it. They had agreed to these terms. The contract was legally binding. On the Defender, Captain Foster watched his countdown timer. 50 minutes passed. Then 55. Threxon kept talking, kept arguing, kept insisting this was all a bluff. When the hour ended, Captain Foster gave the order. A single missile launched from the Defender. It streaked through the atmosphere and hit an empty mining platform 3 kilometers from the main facility. The explosion was visible from space. The platform vaporized instantly. The message was crystal clear. The humans were not bluffing. Threxon evacuated his people in 28 minutes. Every Zetherian worker and piece of equipment was loaded onto ships and sent away from New Terra. The mining operation that had taken months to build was abandoned in less than half an hour. News of the incident spread through the galaxy faster than light travel. Within days, every civilization knew what had happened. The reactions were explosive. On Station Viridia, Ambassador Patricia Morrison faced an emergency meeting of the Galactic Trade Council. The chamber was packed with angry alien delegates demanding explanations. Veltara stood first. Her blue skin was flushed darker with rage. This is barbaric. You destroyed private property over a minor contract dispute. This is not how civilized species behave. Patricia remained calm. She had expected this reaction. We destroyed property that was being used to violate our legally binding agreement. The contract clearly stated the consequences of breach. Drexel Corporation signed that contract knowing the terms. They were warned. They ignored the warning. We enforced our terms exactly as written. Krelax waved several arms in agitation. Trade relationships require flexibility. They require understanding and compromise. You cannot just shoot at people who disagree with you. Daniel stood beside Patricia. His voice was firm. They didn't disagree with us. They violated a contract. They stole our resources. They poisoned our planet. And they did it believing there would be no consequences. We proved them wrong. The debate went on for hours. Some aliens argued that humans were too aggressive. Others pointed out that the contract had been signed willingly. A few quietly admitted that maybe clear enforcement wasn't such a bad idea. The council reviewed the evidence. They examined the contract. They looked at the communication records. They checked galactic law. In the end, they found no legal grounds to punish humanity. The contract was legitimate. The terms were clear. The humans had followed their own procedures exactly, but the council was deeply troubled. For thousands of years, galactic trade had operated on flexibility and power dynamics. Contracts were starting points for negotiation, not absolute rules. Humans had introduced something completely foreign to this system. They had introduced consequences. What disturbed the old powers most was the realization that humans meant every single word in their contracts. In a galaxy where agreements were treated as flexible suggestions, this was revolutionary and terrifying. News of the Drexel incident traveled through every corner of the galaxy. Reactions varied wildly depending on who was listening. The major powers were angry and threatened. The smaller civilizations were curious and hopeful. Everyone was talking about the humans who had actually enforced their contract with military force. 3 weeks after the incident, Ambassador Patricia Morrison received an unexpected visitor. Kyle Zeth, the crystalline alien from the Threxian Confederation, requested a private meeting. Patricia remembered him from the first gathering. He had been the one who didn't laugh at the human contract. Kyle Zeth arrived with a small delegation of trade officials and legal experts. His body was made of a crystal-like substance that reflected light in beautiful patterns. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes. "We have been watching your species with great interest," Kyle Zeth began. "My people have been conducting interstellar trade for 800 years. In that time, we have learned a painful lesson. Most species say one thing and do another. Contracts are just opening positions for eventual compromise. Nobody actually enforces the terms as written." Patricia listened carefully. The Threxians had a reputation as tough but honest traders. If they wanted to talk, it was worth hearing them out. Kyle Zeth continued, "Your species operates differently. You state your terms clearly. You enforce them absolutely. This is unusual, but it is not unwelcome. We wish to propose a comprehensive trade agreement using your standard contract framework." Daniel pulled up the contract template on his screen. "You understand this means no modifications to our core principles? No changes to enforcement clauses? We may request clarifications on certain technical points," Kyle Zeth replied. "But we will not ask you to compromise your values. If we sign this document, we will honor every word. We expect the same from you." The negotiation took 3 weeks. The Threxians asked detailed questions about every clause. They wanted to understand exactly what they were agreeing to. Unlike the other aliens who had dismissed the contract as unreasonable, the Threxians studied it carefully. When both sides finally understood each other completely, they signed. Humanity gained access to advanced medical technology and educational exchanges. The Threxians gained access to human agricultural products and manufacturing techniques. But more importantly, both sides gained something rare in galactic trade. They gained trust. The Threxian agreement changed everything. Other species started approaching Earth with new proposals. They weren't coming to exploit the newcomers anymore. They were coming to establish relationships built on mutual benefit. A small insect-like species called the Chitauri signed next. Then came the Volnar, a peaceful species of scholars. Within 2 months, humanity had established 7 new trade partnerships. Each one followed the same pattern: clear terms, fair dealing, absolute enforcement. Frank Martinez watched the new partnerships grow from his office on Earth. His trade compliance office was getting bigger every week. More staff, more ships, more responsibility. "We're becoming a model," Catherine observed during a morning meeting. "Smaller civilizations are starting to use our contract language in their own agreements with each other. We're changing how the galaxy does business." Paul looked worried. "That's going to make the major powers even angrier. The Solarian Consortium built their wealth on one-sided contracts. If everyone starts demanding fair terms, their whole economic system collapses." "Let it collapse," Frank said firmly. "Our job is to protect human interests and maintain fair trade. If that disrupts corrupt systems, so be it." But the major powers were not going to accept disruption quietly. Veltara, of the Solarian Consortium, convened a secret meeting with representatives from 5 major civilizations. They met on a private station far from any official channels. "The humans are destroying the natural order," Veltara argued to the assembled group. "They've been in space for less than a year, yet they dictate terms to civilizations that are thousands of years old. This cannot continue." Cothran of the Qualathi Dominion waved his tentacles in agreement. What do you propose? Economic sanctions? Krelax shook his middle head. Sanctions won't work. Too many species are already trading with them. We would hurt ourselves more than we hurt the humans. Veltara's expression became calculating. Then we need to be clever. We will sign one of their precious contracts. We will follow every single rule perfectly for several months. And then we will engineer a situation where they appear to be the ones violating the agreement. When they try to enforce their terms, we will have legal grounds to respond with force. Other species will see that human methods lead to war. Support for them will evaporate. The plan was dangerous. It could start an actual war, but the assembled powers agreed. The Solarian Consortium would sign a human contract for strategic metal trading. They would follow every clause perfectly while secretly preparing their trap. On Earth, Frank's intelligence team picked up unusual activity. Stephen Wright was a former military intelligence officer who now worked for the Trade Compliance Office. He noticed the Solarian interest in signing a contract seemed too sudden. They're up to something, Stephen told Frank during a secure meeting. The Solarians don't back down this easily. They're planning something. Catherine agreed. But we can't refuse a legitimate contract offer. That would make us look like the unreliable ones. Frank thought for a long moment. Then we accept their offer. But we watch them carefully, very carefully, and we prepare for trouble. 2 weeks later, the Solarian Consortium submitted a formal trade proposal. They wanted to exchange rare metals for human computer technology. The contract was humanity's standard template, completely unmodified. Every enforcement clause was intact. Daniel reviewed it for 3 days looking for traps or hidden language. He found nothing. It appears legitimate. All our protections are in place. I can't find anything wrong with it. Patricia was more suspicious. Veltara is not stupid. She wouldn't sign this unless she had a plan. Then we'll be ready for whatever she's planning, Frank assured her. But we can't refuse a contract that meets all our requirements. We have to be consistent. The signing ceremony took place on Station Viridia with full diplomatic protocol. Veltara smiled throughout the event. She was gracious and diplomatic. She praised human innovation and spoke about mutual prosperity. To every observer, it looked like even the mighty Solarian Consortium had finally accepted humanity's way of doing business. After the ceremony, Kyleseth approached Patricia privately. Be careful with the Solarians. They are known for their cunning. This feels wrong. Patricia nodded. We know, we're watching them. Good. Because if they're planning treachery, they will make it look legitimate. They will make it look like you are the ones breaking the contract. Be ready for that. Patricia thanked him for the warning. The Threxians had proven to be good friends to humanity. Their advice was valuable. For 4 months, the Silarian contract proceeded perfectly. Shipments of rare metals arrived at Earth's orbital stations exactly on schedule. Human computer technology flowed to Silarian worlds with equal precision. Both sides fulfilled every obligation down to the smallest detail. But in secret, Veltara's people were preparing. They were setting up the most elaborate trap in recent galactic history. And they were confident that when it was sprung, humanity's reputation, would Commander Helen Foster ran Processing Station Gamma with precision and care. The orbital station received shipments from various alien trading partners and processed them for distribution to Earth. Helen was thorough in her inspections and never cut corners on safety procedures. On this particular day, a routine Silarian shipment arrived. The manifest looked perfect as always. Rare metals for Earth's manufacturing industries. The paperwork was complete and properly signed. Everything appeared normal. Helen supervised the unloading personally. The cargo containers were moved into Bay 3 for inspection. Standard procedure required scanning all incoming materials for contamination or safety hazards. Helen's team began the scans. Alarms started blaring within minutes. Red lights flashed throughout the bay. Helen's sensor operator called out urgently. Commander, radiation spike in Cargo Bay 3. It's coming from the Solarian containers. Helen didn't hesitate. Evacuate the bay immediately. Seal all access points. Get everyone to decontamination. Her team moved fast. Years of emergency training took over. Within 3 minutes, all personnel were out of the contaminated area. The bay was sealed tight. Helen pulled up the sensor readings on her command screen. What she saw made her blood run cold. The metal shipment was contaminated with radioactive isotopes, dangerous ones, the kind that could cause serious health problems. And none of this contamination was listed in the shipping manifest. This was a clear violation of safety protocols outlined in sections 31 and 32 of the contract. Helen counted her people. 18 workers had been exposed to the radiation before the bay was sealed. She sent them all to the medical center immediately. The doctors assured her they would recover, but it was still serious exposure. She filed an incident report to the Trade Compliance Office within the hour. Frank Martinez received it while having his morning coffee. He nearly dropped the cup when he read the details. "Emergency meeting, now," Frank ordered. Within minutes, his senior staff gathered in the conference room. Catherine and Paul joined him to review the situation. "This is bad," Frank said grimly. "We have 18 injured workers. Clear safety violations. The Solarians shipped contaminated materials without disclosure." Catherine pulled up the relevant contract sections on the main screen. Sections 31 and 32 are crystal clear. All shipments must meet safety standards. All hazardous materials must be properly disclosed and contained. The Solarians violated both clauses. Paul nodded. "We need to issue formal notice. Standard procedure. Give them 72 hours to respond." Frank agreed. The notice was drafted and sent within 2 hours. It detailed the violations and demanded immediate explanation, compensation for the injured workers, and penalties as outlined in the contract. The Solarian response came in 6 hours instead of 72. But it wasn't the response anyone expected. Velterra broadcast her message to the entire Galactic Trade Council. Her voice was filled with righteous anger. "The humans have committed fraud. They have falsified evidence of contamination to avoid paying for goods they received. Our shipment met every specification. The radiation readings are fabricated. This is a deliberate attempt to damage the reputation of the Solarian Consortium." She provided her own evidence, sensor data showing clean readings, shipping manifests signed by supposedly neutral third-party inspectors, testimony from a Qualathi official who claimed to have personally verified the shipment before it left Solarian space. The evidence looked convincing, professional, detailed. It created a perfect he-said-she-said situation. The humans claimed contamination. The Solarians claimed fraud. Who was telling the truth? Patricia Morrison stared at the Solarian broadcast with growing fury. "It's a setup. They planned this from the beginning." Daniel was already analyzing the conflicting evidence. "Their documentation is good, very good, but not perfect. Look at these timestamps. They don't match up correctly. And this Qualathi inspector they cite? I need to check his background." Paul was typing rapidly. "Found him. Inspector Calden has been on Solarian payroll for 6 years. He's not a neutral party at all." "Can we prove the contamination was real?" Frank asked Helen through the video link. Helen's face was set in hard lines. "Sir, I trust my sensors and my team. That radiation was real. I have 18 people in medical right now because of it. The Solarians are lying." But proving the Solarians were lying would take time. Time that humanity didn't have. Every hour that passed, the Solarian version of events spread further through the galaxy. Other species were starting to believe that maybe the humans had fabricated the evidence. Maybe human enforcement was just an excuse to cheat their trading partners. "If we move to enforcement now, we look guilty," Catherine observed. "We need to prove our case first." Daniel shook his head. "That could take weeks or months. We need forensic specialists, independent analyses, testimony from witnesses across multiple star systems. By then, our reputation will be destroyed." Frank made a decision. "Then we work fast. Paul, get your forensic team working around the clock. I want every piece of evidence documented and verified. Catherine, coordinate with our intelligence assets. Find out what the Solarians are really planning. Stephen, prepare enforcement options but don't move yet." He turned to Patricia. "Ambassador, we need time. Can you buy us some?" Patricia thought for a moment. I can request a formal Trade Council investigation. It will slow things down, give us room to work, but it also means accepting council jurisdiction over the dispute. Do it. We need to prove our case beyond any doubt. The next 3 weeks were intense. Paul's forensic team worked day and night analyzing every detail. They traced the Solarian documents back to their source and found evidence of fabrication, timestamps that had been altered, signatures that had been forged, data that didn't match real sensor readings. Intelligence operatives dug deeper. They found communications between Veltara and several major powers, messages that outlined the plan to discredit human enforcement methods, discussions about how to make the trap look legitimate. Most damning of all, they found the real pre-shipment inspection records. Records that showed the Solarians had intentionally contaminated the metals. They had created a safety hazard on purpose, knowing it would be detected, and then prepared false evidence to make the humans look like frauds. But gathering evidence was only half the battle. They had to present it in a way that would convince the galactic community. The Trade Council hearing became the most watched event in years. Representatives from dozens of civilizations filled the chamber. Many were convinced they were about to witness humanity's humiliation and downfall. Patricia stood before the council with calm confidence. She presented the evidence methodically. Each piece of forensic analysis was explained clearly. The communications between conspirators were played for everyone to hear. The real inspection records were displayed alongside the false ones. Daniel supported her with precise legal arguments. He showed how the Solarian actions violated not just their contract with humanity, but council regulations on fair trading practices. Veltara's defense was passionate. The humans are desperate. They have assembled circumstantial evidence and conspiracy theories. They are asking you to believe that one of the galaxy's most respected civilizations would deliberately poison a shipment and then frame our trading partners. This is paranoid fantasy. The council deliberated for 2 full days. The vote was close. Some members believed the Solarians, others believed the humans. But in the end, the evidence was too strong to ignore. The council declared that the Solarians had indeed violated their contract. They had deliberately created a hazardous situation and then attempted to frame humanity for fraud. It was one of the most serious trade violations in recent memory. The Punis 3 human warships appeared in space near Station Meridian, the largest Solarian trade hub in the sector. The UES Defender was joined by 2 cruisers. Captain Gregory Foster commanded the small fleet with clear orders from Earth. This time, enforcement would be visible to the entire galaxy. Station Meridian was massive. Hundreds of ships docked there every day. Thousands of aliens lived and worked in its corridors. It was a symbol of Solarian economic power, and it was about to become a symbol of something else entirely. Solarian Consortium. This is Captain Foster of the United Earthship Defender. Your organization has been found in violation of contract terms through deliberate fraud and safety violations. As specified in Section 97 of our agreement, we are hereby seizing consortium assets equivalent to damages owed plus penalties. The station commander, a Solarian named Kethril, responded with disbelief. You cannot seize our property. The council made their ruling. This is piracy. Catherine Bell's voice came through the communication channel from Earth. The council validated our findings of fact. They confirmed you violated the contract. Our agreement specifies the remedies for violation. We are enforcing those remedies exactly as written. You signed this contract. You agreed to these terms. But you can't just take our ships, Kethril protested. Section 97, Paragraph 4, Catherine replied calmly. In cases of deliberate fraud resulting in injury to personnel, the injured party may seize assets equivalent to 3 times the value of damages. You injured 18 of our workers. You attempted to destroy our reputation. The math is quite clear. Captain Foster gave the order. Human Marines in combat armor began boarding Station Meridian. They moved with military precision, securing 3 Solarian cargo vessels that were docked at the station. The ships were loaded with rare metals, computer components, and luxury goods worth far more than the original contaminated shipment. The Solarians tried to resist. Security forces on the station moved to block the Marines, but they were trained for dealing with criminals and riots, not military operations. The human Marines were professionals who had trained for exactly this type of boarding action. Within 30 minutes, all three vessels were under human control. No shots were fired. No one was killed. But the message was absolute. Humans would enforce their contracts with whatever force was necessary. The galaxy erupted in chaos. The Solarian Consortium screamed about piracy and theft. They demanded immediate action from the Galactic Trade Council. Several allied powers threatened sanctions against humanity. Some even hinted at military response. For 3 tense days, it seemed the situation might explode into actual war. Human ships moved to defensive positions. Trading partners were contacted and warned that hostilities might begin. Earth's military went on alert. Then something unexpected happened. Kyle Zeth of the Threxian Confederation called for an emergency council session. When he spoke, his crystalline voice carried weight that even the major powers couldn't ignore. "We have watched these events with great interest," Kyle Zeth began. "For 800 years, my people have conducted trade across the galaxy. In that time, we have learned how the system works. Contracts are suggestions. Enforcement is weak. Power determines outcomes. The strong exploit the weak, and everyone pretends this is acceptable." He gestured to the assembled delegates. "How many of you have been cheated in trades? How many have had partners ignore their obligations because they knew enforcement was impractical? How many times have you absorbed losses because fighting for justice was too expensive or too time-consuming?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Every species present had experienced exactly what Kyle Zeth described. It was the normal cost of doing business in the galaxy. "The humans have introduced something different," Kyle Zeth continued. "They state their terms clearly. They fulfill their obligations completely. And they enforce violations absolutely. Yes, their methods are harsh by our standards. Yes, they use military force where we would use diplomacy and delay. But consider what they are actually doing." He turned to face Veltara directly. "The Solarians deliberately contaminated a shipment. They injured 18 human workers. Then they tried to frame the humans for fraud through elaborate deception. And when caught, they expected nothing more than a small fine and a scolding. Because that is how our system has always worked." Kyle Zeth's voice grew stronger. "The humans refused to accept that system. They proved their case with evidence. They followed the procedures outlined in a contract that both sides signed willingly. And now they are collecting the penalties that were agreed upon in advance. How is this piracy? How is this unjust?" Veltara tried to respond, but Kyle Zeth wasn't finished. "If we condemn human enforcement, we are saying that fraud and deception are acceptable business practices. We are saying that contracts mean nothing. We are saying that the strong can cheat the weak without consequence. Is that the galactic community we want to be?" The debate that followed lasted 8 hours. Younger civilizations spoke up in support of humanity. They shared stories of being exploited by one-sided contracts. They talked about how major powers had cheated them for generations, knowing there would be no real consequences. Even some established species admitted that stronger enforcement might benefit everyone. A few council members pointed out that if contracts became truly binding, it would actually make trade more predictable and stable. The vote was closer than anyone expected, but humanity won. The council would not interfere with human enforcement of their contracts. However, humans were required to continue following their own stated procedures. They couldn't use enforcement as cover for aggression or territorial expansion. The decision changed everything. The Solarian Consortium tried to maintain their old business practices with non-human partners. But other species started demanding better terms. Why accept one-sided agreements when you could negotiate a human-style contract that protected everyone fairly? Within 6 months, the Solarian economic dominance began to crumble. Trading partners either demanded fair contracts or took their business elsewhere. The consortium tried to adapt, but their entire model was built on exploitation. When forced to trade fairly, they had no advantage. Other major powers watched and learned. Some adapted quickly, accepting that the rules had changed. Others resisted and found themselves losing influence. A few tried to create their own enforcement systems, But without humanity's consistency and resolve, their efforts fell flat. Patricia Morrison stood in her office on Station Viridia, watching the transformation happen in real time. New contracts were being signed every day. Species that had never trusted each other before were forming partnerships based on clear terms and mutual benefit. Daniel entered with the latest reports. We have 23 new contract proposals this week. 5 from civilizations we've never even met. They're all requesting our standard terms. Patricia smiled. We changed the rules. Some people are still angry about it, Daniel observed. The old powers who built their wealth on unfair dealing. They see us as disruptors and troublemakers. Let them be angry. We came to space to trade honestly and build relationships based on respect. We never promised to make everyone like us. Frank Martinez joined them via video link from Earth. Latest compliance report shows all our trading partners are in full adherence to their contracts. The few minor violations we've detected were corrected immediately when we notified the partners. Most of them apologized and fixed the problems before we even had to threaten enforcement. Because they know we mean what we say, Catherine added from beside Frank. We've established credibility. When something is in the contract, people believe we will enforce it. That's the key, Patricia agreed. Consistency. We treat everyone the same. We enforce the same rules for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're our oldest ally or a new partner. The contract is the contract. Kyle Zeth visited Patricia later that day. I wanted to congratulate you personally. You have accomplished something remarkable. You have made contracts mean something again. Patricia thanked him. We couldn't have done it without supporters like you. When you spoke at the council, you turned the tide. 1 year had passed since humanity first presented their contract to the galaxy. The changes were profound and visible everywhere. Station Viridia had become the busiest trade hub in the sector, not because of its size or location, but because it was where fair dealing was guaranteed. Patricia Morrison walked through the station's main concourse, watching the activity around her. Aliens from dozens of species moved through the corridors conducting business. But the atmosphere was different now. There was less suspicion, less hostility. People negotiated with confidence because they knew the terms would be honored. A small delegation of Varelian traders approached her. The Varelians were a new species that had just achieved spaceflight 6 months ago. They were in almost the same position humanity had been in a year earlier. Ambassador Morrison, their leader spoke through a translation device. We have read about what your people accomplished. We face similar challenges. The major powers offer us contracts that are completely one-sided. They expect us to accept exploitation because we are new. We want to know how you resisted. Patricia smiled warmly. We simply refused to accept unfair terms. We stated our principles clearly and we didn't compromise on them. But more importantly, we enforced what we agreed to, every single time. The Varelian looked worried. But we don't have military ships like you do. We cannot enforce contracts with force. You don't need warships, Patricia explained. You need consistency and resolve. When someone violates your contract, you respond immediately and proportionally. You cut off trade. You publicize the violation. You make it clear that doing business with you means honoring commitments. Eventually, the galaxy will respect that. She paused and added, and if you need support, there are now dozens of species who trade fairly. Form alliances with them. We started alone, but we built partnerships quickly once others saw we were serious. You can do the same. The Varelians thanked her and left to consider their options. Patricia knew they would face difficulties, but she also knew the galaxy had changed. Fair trading was no longer a radical idea. It was becoming the norm. In his office on Earth, Frank Martinez prepared his annual report to the government. He reflected on everything that had happened since that first meeting on Station Viridia. The laughter, the resistance, the attempts at deception, and ultimately, the transformation. He wrote in his report, when we entered the galactic community, we were expected to accept the existing system. A system where contracts meant little and power meant everything. We refused. Not through arrogance, but through principle. We believed that agreements should be honored by all parties equally. The result has exceeded our expectations. We now have active trade agreements with 42 different civilizations. Compliance rates are above 98%. The few violations that occur are typically minor and are corrected immediately upon notification. More significantly, other species have begun adopting our contract framework for their own agreements with each other. We have not made ourselves universally popular. Several major powers still resent our influence. They view us as disruptors who upset the natural order. But the younger civilizations and smaller powers appreciate what we've accomplished. They see us as proof that fair dealing is possible. Frank paused in his writing and looked at the data scrolling across his secondary screen. Trade volumes were up 300% from a year ago. Human goods were in high demand not because they were superior, but because trading with humans meant clear terms and reliable delivery. Trust had value in the marketplace. Catherine Bell entered his office with the latest enforcement report. We had 2 violations this month. Both were accidental rather than deliberate. Partners self-reported the problems and fixed them before we even sent notices. Self-reporting violations, Frank mused. That would have been unthinkable a year ago. It makes sense, though, Catherine replied. They know we'll find out eventually. Better to report it themselves, fix it quickly, and maintain the relationship. The penalty for accidental violations is much lighter than for deliberate ones. That's the system working as intended. We're not trying to punish people. We're trying to ensure fairness. Stephen Wright joined them with military updates. The Defense Department is scaling back enforcement vessel deployments. Compliance has been so good that we don't need rapid response ships at every trading post anymore. We're moving to a reserve system. Ships can reach any trouble spot within 12 hours if needed. Frank approved. Good. The less military presence we need, the better. Force should always be a last resort. On Processing Station Gamma, Commander Helen Foster supervised the latest shipment arrival. It was from the Solarian Consortium, the same organization that had tried to frame humanity a year ago. But the consortium had changed dramatically. After their humiliation at the Council and the loss of their seized assets, the Solarians had undergone a complete restructuring. Veltara had been removed from leadership. New executives had taken over with a mandate to operate honestly. They had spent months rebuilding their reputation through careful adherence to contract terms. Helen inspected the shipment personally. The manifest was perfect. The materials were exactly as specified. The safety documentation was complete and accurate. She found no violations of any kind. Solarian vessel, this is Commander Foster. Your shipment is approved for processing. All documentation is in order. Well done. The Solarian captain responded with obvious relief. Thank you, Commander. We take our obligations very seriously now. Helen smiled slightly. It had taken a harsh lesson, but even the Solarians had learned that fair dealing was better than deception in the long run. Back on Station Viridia, the Galactic Trade Council held its regular session. The agenda was filled with routine matters, but one item stood out. Paul Sanders was presenting a proposal to formalize human contract practices into official council guidelines. The evidence is clear, Paul argued before the assembled delegates. Trade disputes have decreased by 40% across the galaxy. Contract violations are down by 60%. Species report higher satisfaction with their trading relationships. These improvements correlate directly with the adoption of clear terms and consistent enforcement. We propose that the Council adopt standard contract guidelines based on human practices. These would be optional, not mandatory, but they would provide a framework that any species could use to establish fair trading relationships. Krelax of the Zetherians stood to speak. His attitude had changed considerably over the past year. The Zetherians had lost significant market share by refusing to adapt. They had finally accepted that the old ways were gone. The Zetherian Empire supports this proposal, Krelax said. We initially opposed human methods. We believed they were too rigid and too harsh. We were wrong. The galaxy has become more prosperous because of clearer contracts and better enforcement. My people have learned this lesson at great cost. We now trade under human-style contracts exclusively, and our relationships have improved. The proposal passed with strong support. The Council would publish standard contract guidelines within 3 months. They would be based largely on humanity's template, adapted slightly for different cultural contexts and species requirements. Patricia watched the vote with satisfaction. We set out to protect human interests. We ended up changing the entire galaxy. Daniel stood beside her. Think it will last? What happens in 10 years or 50 years when new species join the community? Will they maintain these standards? That depends on us, Patricia replied. We have to remain consistent. We can never let violations slide, no matter how minor. The moment we show that contracts are flexible, the moment we fail to enforce our terms, the whole system starts to collapse. Kyle Zeth approached them after the session. You have accomplished something truly remarkable. In 800 years of Threxian trading, we never managed to change the fundamental nature of galactic commerce. You did it in 1 year. We had good allies, Patricia said, gesturing to Kyle Zeth. Without your support at critical moments, we would have failed. Perhaps, but we supported you because you were right. Fair dealing benefits everyone. It just took a stubborn species from a small planet to prove it to the rest of us. As Patricia returned to her quarters that evening, she reflected on the journey. 1 year ago, aliens had laughed at human demands for fair contracts. They had seen humanity as naive newcomers who would quickly learn to accept exploitation as normal. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy a different lesson. Agreements matter. Words on a page aren't just suggestions. And when both sides honor their commitments, everyone benefits. The major powers had resisted at first. Some still grumbled about human influence, but even they couldn't deny the results. Trade was more stable. Disputes were resolved faster. Partnerships lasted longer. The galaxy was more prosperous because contracts actually meant something. Frank Martinez ended his annual report with a simple observation that captured everything. We entered the galactic community as outsiders. We were expected to adapt to existing practices. Instead, we stayed true to our principles. We insisted on fairness. We enforced accountability. And slowly, the galaxy adapted to us. The aliens laughed at our contract until we started enforcing it. They don't laugh anymore. Now they ask us to help them write their own contracts. They ask us to mediate their disputes. They ask us to teach them how we built trust through consistency. We changed the galaxy not through conquest or superior technology, but through a simple radical act. We honored our commitments and demanded others honor theirs. It shouldn't have been revolutionary. But in a galaxy where contracts were meaningless, it was. 1 year ago, we were newcomers begging for trade partnerships. Today, we are the standard by which fair dealing is measured. Not because we sought that role, but because we simply refuse to compromise our values. The future remains uncertain. New challenges will arise. But we have established something important. We have proven that a better way is possible, that contracts can mean something, that trust can be built through consistency, and that even the smallest, newest species can change the galaxy if they have the courage to stand by their principles. In trading posts and cargo bays, in council chambers and negotiating rooms, across the vast expanse of inhabited space, a new era had begun. An era where a handshake meant something, where a signature carried weight, where an agreement once made was an agreement kept. The humans had brought their values to the stars, not through force or threats, but through the revolutionary act of meaning what they said and doing what they promised. And the galaxy, reluctantly at first and then enthusiastically, had learned to respect it. I spoke the truth, Kyle Zeth replied. My people have suffered under the old system too. We are simply better at navigating it than most. But your system is superior. Clear terms, fair dealing, real consequences. This is how trade should always have worked. As Kyle Zeth left, Patricia looked out at the busy station. Ships from dozens of worlds moved in organized patterns. Trade was flowing. Partnerships were growing. And for the first time in galactic history, everyone involved could trust that the agreements they signed would be honored. The aliens had laughed at humanity's contract. They weren't laughing anymore. Meant, however, was typical for the Council. A fine that the Solarians could easily afford. A formal reprimand that meant nothing. A suggestion that both parties try to work things out peacefully. Patricia stood before the Council one final time. Her voice was clear and firm. We appreciate the Council's finding of fact. The evidence clearly showed what happened. However, the penalty is completely insufficient. Our contract with the Solarian Consortium includes specific remedies for breach. Those remedies include immediate termination of the agreement and punitive damages. We will be enforcing those terms. Veltara actually laughed. It was a genuine sound of amusement. You won your case. Take your victory and move on. This is how galactic commerce works. You file complaints, councils issue findings, everyone pays small fines and continues trading. This is the way things have always been done. Patricia's response was quiet but carried through the entire chamber. No, this is how things used to be done, not anymore. Would be destroyed forever. The trap would be sprung at Processing Station Gamma. The humans monitoring the station had no idea what was coming. But they were about to face the greatest challenge to their contract enforcement system yet. Everything humanity had built in the galactic community was about to be tested. Veltara left the council chamber furious. She met with other major powers in secret. The humans are disrupting everything. They've been in space for less than a year, and they're changing rules that have existed for millennia. We cannot let this continue. But stopping humanity would prove more difficult than anyone expected. Because word was spreading among the younger and weaker civilizations. The species that had always been exploited by one-sided contracts were paying attention. And they were starting to think that maybe the human way was better. You will regret this. In 6 months, maybe less, you will come begging us to trade. And when you do, our terms will be much worse than what we offered today. Arrogance has a price. Patricia met her gaze without flinching. Perhaps, or perhaps in 6 months you will regret not taking this opportunity. Time will tell. The aliens left Station Viridia, believing they had won. They had refused to accept unfair terms from a weak species. They would wait for the humans to come crawling back. It was how things always worked in the galaxy. But the aliens were about to learn something important about humans. Something that would change galactic trade forever. Humans were stubborn. And when humans wrote something down in a contract, they meant every single word.